Pound of Flesh, Chapter 2, Part 2. Simba bared his teeth at the young dark-furred cub who had menaced his daughter. Quickly, he scanned the grass for any trace of any other outsider. He regretted mentioning the Outlands to Kiara before she had gone for a walk. He was disappointed in Timon and Pumbaa. They had lowered their guard while watching Kiara, allowing her to slip away unnoticed. Did this cub come over here by himself? Is he alone? I can't believe Kiara wandered this far. She doesn't even understand how dangerous— Daddy! Simba snapped back to reality when his daughter ran up and hid behind his legs. Kiara, are you all right? Simba looked his daughter over. Are you hurt? Nuh-uh, I'm fine. Are you sure? Daddy, I'm fine. I told you to stay on the path I marked for you. Don't run off again. Understand? Kiara nodded and looked down, her ears lowered. Okay. I have to teach her to understand. She didn't even know how much danger she was in. Simba then turned to the outsider cub. The strange cub was covering his ears with his paws, and he was shaking violently in fear. Simba even heard a little whimper. His eyes widened even more when Nala, Timon, Pumbaa, and 3 other lionesses who had all been looking for Kiara caught up with Simba. Who are you? Simba growled at the cub. Kovu. Kovu? Simba looked carefully at the cub's dark fur and green eyes, and sure enough, he recalled the name of one of the young cubs he'd exiled. A small chill ran up his spine. Is Zira your mother? Yes, he is my son, Simba. A sharp jolt of surprise hit Simba when Zira appeared from the grass and slinked up behind Kovu. Simba growled at her sly smirk. He was glad he had Nala and the lionesses behind him. Still, all Zira had to do was leap forward. Get out, Simba snarled. I banished you. Leave with your son now. Because he was the one trespassing, I will let this go. But you know the penalty for returning to my lands. Zira rolled her eyes. She muttered, Your lands. The end of her tail flicked from side to side. She gazed knowingly yet lazily at his growling lionesses. Simba bared his teeth. Don't think I'm oblivious to the poaching you do in the Pride Lands. We have to eat, don't we? We have to feed our cubs. If you found lands elsewhere, you could eat all without trespassing. Zira snorted and then spat on the ground next to Kovu, who was sitting up. Fine, I'll go. A slow smile stretched across Zira's narrow muzzle. But I can't help but feel this deal is a little lopsided. So, if you need your pound of flesh for my trespass, here. Zira cooed as she lowered her head and slid an unwilling Kovu over to him with her nose before she stepped back. I would be more than glad to offer you my son as payment, in full. Simba's eyes widened and several lionesses gasped. What? She's offering her own son to me? Why? Simba curled his lip in disgust as he looked down at the cub, shivering pitifully before him. This is a challenge. Is this some sort of sick joke? Is she mocking me? This is a joke, right? Simba hadn't seen Kovu since he'd been turned out with his family, and Simba noted how scrawny he was. The cub was about 4 months older than Kiara, but he was still undersized. The penalty for returning to the Pride Lands after an exile was to take a pound of flesh, but killing an innocent cub who had just strayed into forbidden lands, it seemed too cruel for Simba to stomach. Simba knew, however, that he was obligated to destroy the son of his enemy. The very cub Zira had claimed had been hand-chosen by Scar from beyond the grave. A breeze ruffled Simba's mane. He looked up from Kovu to Zira, who beamed back malevolently. He could see just about every tooth in the back of her jaw. He then looked back down to Kovu, who was shivering even harder than before. Do I kill him? Right here and now? And in front of Kiara? His life must be a constant struggle for food, despite all the poaching. I can't imagine Zira as a loving, positive influence. She is insane. He'd always felt guilty about sending all the outsider cubs away with their frightened mothers. And who was to say that they would repeat their predecessors' actions? Wasn't generosity and forgiveness some of a good king's best qualities? His train of thought then went somewhere he never would have considered when he had woken up that morning. And in staying with the outsiders, there's a higher chance that Kovu will return with Zira's delusions drilled into his head, every last false one of them. He might look scrawny now, but he's no Scar or even Nuka. What's all talk and no action? Zira taunted. She took a step towards her son. So she is mocking me. Without answering, Simba quickly raised a paw, put it on Kovu's back and pulled the outsider cub forward. Simba's paw pads tingled when they touched Kovu's dusty, slightly matted fur. Several lionesses behind Simba again gave a collective gasp. Simba, he heard Nala say. No, please, Simba, Kovu cried as Zira stood back in mid-step, her eyes wide. Inwardly, Simba was spiteful towards Zira's apparent shock. You swore up and down that I'd kill your cubs, and so you convinced the other lionesses to leave. Too, with theirs. Now you challenge me to kill your son, and you're surprised when it looks like I might? I promise I won't come back, Kovu went on, his voice strangled by terror. Gently, Simba nudged Kovu until they were standing side by side. The cub, bewildered, looked up at the king when Simba said quietly, It's all right. Just sit here for now. Kovu gaped openly back at him as he sat with his shoulders hunched over. He and Kiara exchanged a quick, confused look. Somehow, Simba couldn't help but smile back at the cub. He wasn't even sure what he was thinking. Taking in his enemy's cub on the spot, he had menaced his daughter. But would I be able to watch Zira take her son back with her otherwise? She's an unfit mother. She didn't even think twice about using Kovu as a sacrifice. Why? I do not know. The smile fell from Simba's face, and his eyes narrowed when he snapped his gaze onto Zira, who stood there, chuckling, the shock and terror gone. You are insane. And what will you do with my son? Consider your trespassing forgotten, Zira. Just get out of my sight, Simba growled. We're finished here. He turned away from her and picked up Kiara as an uneasy chill ran down his spine. Nodding, he gestured to Nala to hustle Kovu along. He was too big to carry. Nala was gentle as she nudged the terrified and confused-looking cub. Kiara's scruff was gently held between Simba's teeth. Of course, Simba. As you wish. Zira turned away from the Pride Lance. One of the Pride Lionesses snarled warningly when Zira paused and looked back at Simba. But you're very wrong to think that this is over, she added, slowly shaking her head. Simba narrowed his eyes at Zira. With Kiara's scruff in his mouth, he could say nothing, as the lioness's eyes fell upon his cringing daughter. A foreboding smile widened the pale, furred lioness's jaw. She chuckled darkly as she said, We have barely begun. You are insane. Nala's calm, firm voice came from behind Simba. But we will finish what you have started in your own head, Zira. Simba in his pride growled at Zira as she parted off, chuckling, her gait slow, as if she thought her words would linger in the minds of her enemies the longer they watched her go. One of the lionesses in the pride snorted. Who gives away their own son like that? Another one muttered, more worryingly. Who takes in the son of their enemy? Inwardly, Simba cringed, although his mind was whirling too fast to fully acknowledge the jibe. He lifted his chin. He avoided Nala's glance as he led the lionesses and Kovu back to Bright Rock. What did I just do? End of chapter 2.